Hey guys, it's Megan Eller in sales here in Denver, Colorado with First American Title to give you your weekly Wednesday update. I wanted to give you a sneak peek as to what to expect heading into the early part of 2020, and there's been a lot of questions coming up about when will the buyer pool start to pick up. And so what I went ahead and did was I pulled out for the last 7 years in a row that we've been in this extreme seller's market cycle, and I pulled out how many units went under contract day by day by day. And I wanted to share with you when I see the first two waves of buying pools start to get really active in our marketplace. So when I'm looking at our market, each different colored line on this graph represents a different year. Now, the first bump of activity that I see in buyer activity tends to come in that third weekend in January, where our buyers start to pick up. The next wave of activity that typically comes in is the weekend directly following the Super Bowl. So there are three things outside of this graph that we're watching to ensure that we have our early spring pickup in Metro Denver. Number one ends up being, are the Broncos going to be playing football? And while we've had better luck here in the last couple of games, it's really unlikely that we're going to be in the playoffs. If you look at the graph that's attached here, the yellow and the orange lines represent 2014 and 2016, and those were both playoff years that resulted in trips to the Super Bowl. And during those particular months or those particular years, what we ended up noting is that we didn't have that initial wave of activity coming to the market because we're all at home cheering on our home team. Now, since we're not going to be in the running for the playoffs or the Super Bowl this year, we'll continue to root on our Broncos and we'll hopefully wish them well going into next year, but that's likely that our buyer pool will get active earlier. The next thing that we need to keep an eye out for is what happens with weather. If we have a mild winter, typically what happens is our buyer pool ends up getting active earlier in the year. And if we have that mild winter, people aren't having to schlep through snow and shovel off their driveways, and they're more likely to go out and look at those properties. Unfortunately, I don't know what the weather report's going to look like heading into January, February, or March yet, but that's definitely something that you want to keep an eye on. In 2018, what happened was we ended up having nearly 4 months that we were buried in snow, and it ended up creating a very large delay of our market heading out into 2018. So a word to the wise would be if you already have those listing contracts signed for 2020, once we get one of those beautiful Colorado bluebird days, get out there and have your listing photos taken early so that you're not socked in by snow as we wait into those early spring months. The last thing that we're going to be keeping an eye on is interest rates. As long as interest rates remain low, as they have since June, what happens is our buyer pool gets active early. And so I would encourage you and your buyers that are dependent on financing, which is typically 9 out of 10 people in this particular market, to take advantage of these historically low interest rates and get out there early into those spring markets so that you can save long-term on your largest financial investment. If those three things line up, we're in line to have a very strong spring where a compression cycle begins again. A compression cycle begins when we're short on inventory and we have more buyers in the market to offset demand. Okay, so as long as we're short on inventory, buyer pool remains active, those three things line up, then we're going to have a very strong spring. I hope that if this information helps you better advise your buyers and sellers in the marketplace, that we'll eventually get to meet them at our closing tables. We'll see you soon.